Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we're here for the 11th in what will be around a 34-part series. I've been saying 32-part series. I flipped to the end of the book today, just skimming through. There are 32 chapters. You guys have just been letting me say a 32-part series, and I thought we were here for each other. You guys, I thought we had each other's backs. Obviously, if this is a 32 chapter book, there will be more than 32 parts, probably 34. There will be a chapter by chapter read along, there will be a review, and then I will probably at least have one follow up video, maybe an opening paragraph video. I've got a couple other things that I am thinking about introducing here on the channel, but here for chapter 11, what we're doing is we have an opening section which will be comments from the last video. So if you want to involve yourself in the dialogue for this book, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, and I will read through some comments on each video as we go. Then we will have a So What Happened portion where we discuss what it was that happened in this chapter. Then we will have a Lit Crit section where I'm talking about the stuff that happened in the book on maybe more than just the page. And finally, we will end with a writer's workshop sort of section for this chapter, where we talk a little bit about some of the things that were happening in the craft of writing fairy tale by Stephen King. So, getting right into the comments from last time, Mike tells us that he enjoyed the commentary on side-to-side and in-and-out movements in the shed scene that I talked about last time for the writer's workshop portion of the video. And the way that Stephen King is so deft at knowing exactly what ideas he has to introduce so that he may follow that up with the specifics. He gives you the idea of a room, you know what it is, so he jumps straight in to the oddities that are happening in that room and what makes that room and important enough to be telling you about. Stephen King is masterful at doing that. The reason I wanted to bring up this comment is because I wanted to know if you have any writers that you know of that are, so that's one of those things that's very easy to overlook. It's very easy to ignore. And the reason it's so easy to overlook, the reason it's so easy to ignore, is because when it's good, we don't notice it. When it's good, it doesn't stick out. When it's good, it just serves the greater story. Because Stephen King is so good at it, and perhaps Stephen King is so good at it because of the type of stories that he writes. And because Stephen King is so good at it, we barely notice it when it happens. Jack says, in my mind, canon has two definitions. The canon derived from the text of a single novel, movie, etc., or the second and larger definition of canon being anything that fits a certain theme, e.g. the horror canon, science fiction, and any other genre. This one is more pliable. Pieces of media can be added and subtracted from the audience's discretion, but both are valid. These are both interesting ideas of canon. The idea that canon is, so the Alien movies, for example, its own canon. The slasher films, boom, their own canon. Okay, I can get along with that. And then the idea of canon as genre, what really fits into the genre is canon to the genre, is, what was that movie by Joss Whedon, House in the Woods? Was that what it was called? Is that in the canon of the horror genre? Why or why not? I would kind of contend no. It's just a weird movie, right? But then, I defy you, Jack. If that is what is canon on a project-by-project basis, and a definition of canon on a genre level, what does it mean to be canon to a writer? are On Writing and Danse Macabre, both nonfiction pieces from Stephen King, in the canon of King? Is the Dark Tower series in the canon of King as a horror writer? Patricia weighs in and says, I love this book. Oh, wait. I have 2 hours left on this book. So good. The only real audiobook experiences in which I partake are really sort of nonfiction books, and specifically Robert Greene books. Robert Greene is an author that is, between you and me, guys, between you and me, you can find his books on YouTube. Didn't get it here. Didn't hear it from me. You can find his books on YouTube. Really, really good stuff, especially as an audiobook, because of the reader that they have. So my question here, how popular is Stephen King through the audiobook genre? If you're talking about something such as It, how many hours must that be? And how prevalent is it to both listen to the audiobook while reading it? That's what's interesting to me. I can't do it because I mark up my books. So the audio experience doesn't do anything for me, really. Moving on, so what happened? What was it that happened in this, the 11th chapter of Fairy Tale by Stephen King? Charlie is lost in thought whilst reading Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury, when Dad reminds him that he's going on a camping retreat. I don't remember that happening in the book, which maybe that is for effect, but maybe it's just because I forgot it, as well as Charlie did. There's some school stuff where Charlie is Charlie, and he gets himself an excused absence from school. There's some radar stuff where radar is radar, and she has to pee a lot. Then Charlie decides to journey down the Looking Glass. So this is one of my squabbles with this chapter, is that it's very uneven. It's very boring at the beginning, and then we get into what should be the very exciting stuff. Anyway, in the portal, it has the exact amount of steps that Bowditch had told Charlie it would. The end. That's all that happens. No, that is not all that happens. Charlie emerges into the woods of the New World, and he sees a cottage and an emerald city in the distance. The strangeness and danger are immense. Who knows where there could be a giant cockroach, a giant rabbit. Rabbits are vicious, by the way. Look cute and cuddly sort of to us, I guess, but they are nasty, vile creatures. There's all sorts of big, nasty bats. And worst of all, his phone's not working. The iPhone is dead, so he approaches the cottage, and there's a clothesline filled with shoes. So, I guess it's a shoes line. Then a gray lady approaches him, whose face is, quote, cruelly deformed, end quote. And she knows Radar and Bowditch, and they are friends. And during this conversation, we get on page 198. This is as Charlie is reminiscing on the conversation which had been had. I hadn't been able to say nickname. I hadn't been able to say awesome sauce. Would I be able to say Weisenheimer or knuckle sandwich or yo, you trippin' brah? I didn't think so. I wasn't positive I knew what that inability meant. Stroke. You had a stroke. But I was pretty sure. I'd thought Dora understood me because she understood English. But what if she understood me because I had been speaking her language? or where words like nickname, one where words like nickname and awesome sauce didn't exist. Okay. I'm down. We can play that game. Charlie cries in her chest. And then decides to leave, pardon me. I cannot read my own handwriting. And finally, I climbed with more confidence than I'd felt when going down, but I still kept my right shoulder firmly planted against the wall. I emerged with no incident, and was bending to slide the second board in place over the top of the wall when something circular and very hard pressed into the back of my head. I froze. It turns out he was happy to see me. That's right. Stay nice and still, and we'll have no problem. I'll tell you when to move. It was very easy to imagine that light, singy-song voice saying, "What will you give me if I spin your straw into gold?" I don't want to shoot you, kiddo, and I won't if I get what I came for. And then he added, not as a laugh, but like words in a book, "Ha ha." So that's where we are in the story. Moving on to lit crit stuff. So we have this on page 180. Last time we talked a little bit about maybe the central metaphor here, or maybe something that is just sneaking into the text. I think that there's all sorts of things that find their way into a text which an author doesn't plant there. I think that, if we are to believe that we are told in, where is it here? The art of writing. What is it? I'm skipping out on book titles for some reason. Anyway, one description of writing that is given to us, and I cannot for the life of me think of where it's at, but you can look at the book. I mentioned the book several times in this series so far, is that writing is a vivid and continuous dream. If writing is a vivid and continuous dream, if good writing is a vivid and continuous dream for the reader, certainly it is something even more intoxicating than that for the writer. I can't find my book. I don't know where it's at. I believe it's The Art of Writing. The Art of Fiction. The Art of Fiction by John Gardner. Yes. In The Art of Fiction by John Gardner, he tells us that for a reader, a good story is a vivid and continuous dream. And if it's that for the reader, it's something twice as intoxicating for the writer. So, one thing that happens, one thing that has to happen, one thing that is inevitable to happen, is that when we are composing this vivid and continuous dream, parts of us will sneak in. Parts of the writer will sneak in. And we had a discussion about what if the central metaphor to this story is that Bowditch is Stephen King, Charlie is Joe Hill, Stephen King's son, and the story, the metaphor here is that Stephen King / Bowditch escaped into this world that made him rich. This world, this other world, is the world of writing. Bowditch is trying to pass down, Bowditch / Stephen King, trying to pass down this art of writing, this other world of writing, which made him rich and gave him gold, trying to pass it down to the younger generation, Joe Hill / Charlie. If that is true, if there is some morsel of that in this novel, mightn't Bowditch have something to tell us about the people from whom he learned the other world? Well, he gives us all these metaphors, but we get this on page 180. He, Bowditch, had started to say that Ray Bradbury had gotten his idea for the carousel from the sundial in that other world. The idea of gaining or losing years on a merry-go-round was crazy, but the idea that had Okay. We're getting from the author that, we're getting from Charlie, the narrator, that perhaps Ray Bradbury had been to this other place because the carousel metaphor in his story matches very much the sundial in the other world. The idea of gaining or losing years on a merry-go-round was crazy, but the idea that a respected American author had visited that other place was even crazier, wasn't it? Bradbury had spent his early childhood in Waukegan, which was less than 70 miles from Century's Rest. A brief visit to Bradbury's Wikipedia entry convinced me that it was just a coincidence, unless he had visited the other world as a little kid. If there was another world. Anyway, by the time that he was my age, he was living in Los Angeles. Is this a sneaky admission from Stephen King, Bowditch, that he was inspired in this other world, this other metaphorical world of writing, by Ray Bradbury? I think if you read Danse Macabre, you will get a little bit of the answer that yes, Ray Bradbury is very much in the canon of influential works to one Stephen King. On 183, so on the kissing page to that 181, we have, but Radar would have barked, and she was deeply asleep, woofling her way through some unknowable dream of her own. Unknowable again, Stephen? Come on. Come on, Stephen. At least this time when he gives us unknowable as a descriptor, he does not carry on to describe what is unknowable. On 183, we get this from the author and the narrator. So far as I could make out, the author of that particular chapter was saying that there were actually two Beanstalk stories, talking about Jack and the Beanstalk. The bloodthirsty original and the sanitized version kids got in mom-approved little golden books and the feature-length cartoon. The bloodthirsty original bifurcated, there's one of your $5 words, into two mythic streams, one dark and one light. The dark one had to do with the joys of plunder and murder, as in Jack chopping down the beanstalk and the giant getting smooshed. The light one had to do with what the writer called, quote, the epistemology of Wittgensteinian religious belief, end quote. And if you know what that one means, even with its headlights on, you're a better man than I am. So we have here a meta moment. This is the text talking about the text. This is a meta moment. This is the fairy tale talking about the fairy tale. This is the speaker, the writer, talking about, this is the author talking through the speaker about unwitting authors of the past. This is to probably foreshadow that there will be a light way to view this text and a bloodthirsty way to view this text, to talk about what is going on here. On 192, this is a weird one. This is when Charlie emerges into the new world and he is taking everything in. His senses are ablaze. Best of all was the smell of poppies, like cocoa and vanilla and cherries, except for putting my face into Mom's hair to inhale her scent when I was small. It was the most delicious aroma that had ever graced my olfactories. It is, it turns out, no coincidence that this young man inherited a house that looks like the Bates Hotel. Do with that what you will. Moving on, a couple things to mention on the pop culture type up front. We have here a fairy tale. At least something that is purporting itself to be a fairy tale. Is that all that true? Do most fairy tales start with roughly 163 pages of exposition? Hard to say. But we have it. We have a popular story, a pop fiction. If we're talking about pop fiction, we're talking about culture. In the culture, and this is just something I'm going to throw out there. I have no real desire to pursue these ideas through the rest of the novel. It's just something worth throwing out there, something to bring up a talking point. We're talking about the popular consciousness. Dora, the friend that he met in the new world of writing, the new world of the written word, is the gray lady, right? She's described as gray, slate gray, I believe were the exact words. She's slate gray, the gray lady. The gray lady is, in popular culture, the New York Times. Is there something here to be made about the New York Times best-selling author Stephen King writing a semi-autobiographical work about passing the art of writing down to his son? I don't know. Hard to say. Just want to throw it out there. And then, just on a minor pop culture type note, this is really neither here nor there, but we have this guy popping up for the second time in the novel, the one with the gun, that's happy to see Charlie when he reemerges, and he says, "Ha-ha." He's laughing. Not a real laugh, a laugh, but he says, "Ha-ha." He's the Laughing Man. The Laughing Man is a 1928 film from which the visual inspiration for the Joker was plucked. Just throwing it out there, I have no idea what actually happens in The Laughing Man. It's just interesting to me that we have don't show us, tell us. No, don't tell us, show us, right? We are being shown the Gray Lady and the Laughing Man. You know, whether or not that comes to be anything in the story, I don't know. I just thought it would be worth putting out there. 178. I'm going to throw a term out there. So, for anyone who doesn't know, I have a master's degree in creative writing. I also ran a writer's group for 3 years, I believe, as an undergraduate. So I have been in a whole lot of writer circles, writers groups, story groups, type situations, type scenarios. I'm going to throw out a couple times here in this video, and I think it's warranted. I'm going to throw out a term that is absolutely despised in those circles. Absolutely despised in those circles. And I think you'll be able to figure out why. If you've never been in those situations, you'll be able to figure out why anyway. On 178, we get this. This comes from Dad in a conversation with Charlie. "I asked if you're all right. You hardly touched your dinner, and you seemed off all evening. Thinking about Mr. Bowditch?" Charlie replies, "Well, yeah. It was the truth, although not exactly the way Dad thought." And Dad replies, "You miss him?" To which Charlie says, "I do. A lot. I reached down and stroked Radar's neck. My dog now. My dog, my responsibility." Is this moment earned? That's the phrase. Is this earned? That's the phrase that will get you slapped in a writer's group. But I want to know if this moment is earned. Directly in the sort of, ironically, the wake of Mr. Bowditch passing, we have Charlie and his father together celebrating that they are the inheritors of the Bowditch estate. I mentioned it at the time, I mentioned in that video, that it seemed off. And if it weren't Stephen King, a guy who's written more words than probably anyone, or at least coming up on anyone, maybe less than Ray Bradbury. but a guy who's written a lot. If it wasn't Stephen King, I would have questioned the veracity of those moments. But I gave Stephen King the benefit of the doubt because they felt so disingenuous. But here we are a few chapters later, and Charlie is claiming to Miss Bowditch, quote, a lot. Is this moment earned? I don't think so. It doesn't sound earnest. On 181 we have the unknowable thing. I wrote it in the writers anyway. 186 we have Charlie at school, and he's approached. Charlie. It was Arnetta Freeman, looking relatively gorgeous in her skinny jeans and shell top. I don't know what a shell top is. Does she sell seashells by the sea? Does she sell seashells by the seashore? Does she sell seashells by the seashore in a shell top? I don't know what that is, but I'm an old guy. So, with blue eyes and blonde hair down to her shoulders, Arnetta proved that white America ain't all bad. The year before, we'd been more sporty and at least a little bit famous. The year before, when I'd been more sporty and at least a little bit famous for my turkey bowl heroics, Arnetta and I had spent several study sessions in her basement family room. Studying had been done, but a lot more making out. Hey, Arnie, what's up? Is this moment earned? Where does Arnetta come from? Look, so there is a whole lot in this chapter about hopping from classroom to classroom, and we're getting new characters pop up, new classes pop up, new situations pop up without introduction in the 180-page range of a novel. Okay, I'm on board with that. It's a little weird, it's a little jarring at first. 185 pages into a novel, you're getting new stuff that has no introduction. We're not early in the novel. Why are we getting stuff not introduced but given to us? But okay, this is part of Charlie's life. Charlie was living this life off the page. I can accept that. Getting a love interest, a new love interest, this isn't the girl he mentioned earlier, is it? The dream girl that he mentioned? Maybe it is, and I've missed it. Maybe it is, and I'm screwing up this entire talking point. I don't think it is. And if it is, you introduced her in a completely different way than you introduced her in a completely different way the second time than you did the first time. So this idea being given to us of this new love interest, which is an old flame, is hard to take on page 186. It's hard to have that idea reintroduced in such fashion. But I don't know how else you would have done it. That's the problem with a criticism like this. It's easy to say we're getting slapped in the face with a love interest that's an old flame on page 186. There should have been some mention of this, but I don't know from where that mention would have come. Still, I think it's a valid criticism on a writer's workshop type of level, because it does, in fact, come from nowhere, unless that's that girl's name from earlier. But I don't think so, because the girl from earlier's last name ended in a vowel, I believe. Something like that. Anyway, that's all I have for this episode. If you like this sort of thing, it really does help me out here on the channel if you decide to hit that like button. If you were here by chance but not design and want to continue to make sure that YouTube suggests videos like this in your future feed, consider hitting that subscribe button. Stick around for more. And hey, this is a Wednesday video. We will be back on Monday with Chapter 11. I hope to have you back for that one.